You walked past several of these already. The shelf looked fine, but the version you actually need, the affordable format in the right size, from the brand that was there last time, may not be what is still there. Right now, canning costs are up sharply. A major producer just went through bankruptcy. Entire crop categories are contracting. One item on this list has a seasonal clock, and by the time most people realize it, the window for the year is already closed. Every item here fails differently. Some are import dependent with no American backup. Some come from a single state that has been quietly pulling back for 3 straight years. One had a problem that had nothing to do with the food at all. And the deeper you go, the stranger the weak links get. The last one looks almost too simple. That is exactly why it matters. Number 7. Canned coconut milk. Here is a question most people have never considered. Where does your canned coconut milk actually come from? Not the brand, the source. The physical origin of every single can on that shelf. The answer is Southeast Asia. Thailand, the Philippines, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, almost exclusively. There is no American coconut farm supplying the domestic market. There is no domestic backup. Every can came off a boat. And in July 2025, the US revised import tariffs on coconut products, pushing landed costs up 20 to 25% in some categories. The category is not going to disappear. You will still find coconut milk. The question is, which version is left? What tends to go first is the store brand full-fat 13.5-ounce can. The one that sat at $1.79 for years. The one most households actually cook with for curries, rice dishes, and dairy-free baking. When margins shrink on 100% imported goods, the private label version is where the pain shows first. The premium Thai kitchen can at $4 stays on the shelf. The affordable format quietly disappears or triples in price with no warning label. And here is the part that matters for anyone who bakes or makes whipped coconut cream. The low-fat carton that often replaces the full-fat can on the shelf is not the same product. It will not perform the same way in most recipes. The category remains. The useful format is the one that moves. If you use it regularly, pick up 6 to 10 cans of the full-fat store brand version while the price is still where it belongs. Rotate it through your normal cooking. This is a simple fix, but only before the price signals show up at your store. The next item has a different problem entirely. It is not about imports. It comes almost entirely from one state in America, and that state has been quietly planting less of it for 3 straight years in a row. Number 6. Canned tomatoes. Most people assume American-grown means stable supply, and that assumption is reasonable unless almost all of it comes from one place. California produces roughly 90% of the processed tomatoes in the United States. The canned diced tomatoes, the crushed tomatoes, the paste, the stewed tomatoes on your shelf, the overwhelming majority of what is sold in U.S. stores traces back to California farms, which means what happens in California does not stay in California. As of early 2026, the contracted tonnage for California processing tomatoes hit its lowest level since 2005. The planted acreage is forecast to fall below 200,000 acres for the first time in more than half a century. That is not one bad year. That is the 3rd consecutive year of decline. The farmers are pulling back. Fewer contracts, fewer acres, and 90% of your canned tomato supply coming from one shrinking region. During California's 2022 drought season, tomato paste prices rose as much as 80% above prior year levels. 80%. That was one bad year. The current trajectory is not one bad year. It is a slow, sustained pullback that shows up at the shelf as price pressure first, then format gaps, then generic versions that are simply not being restocked at the same rate. And then there is the Del Monte situation. Del Monte Foods, a 139-year-old company, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in July 2025. The company was unable to absorb the spike in metal can costs that followed 2025 tariffs on steel and aluminum. Their margins were already thin. The can got more expensive. The math stopped working. Their brands, including Contadina, a familiar canned tomato label for millions of households, are now in the hands of 3 separate buyers sorting through an asset sale. What happens to that label on your store's shelf in the next 6 to 12 months depends on which buyer handles distribution in your region. The shelf right now may still look full of canned tomatoes, but the store-brand diced tomato in the practical size is where the gap tends to show before the premium San Marzano imports are affected. The collapse of a major producer upstream does not show up evenly. It shows up first in the affordable formats that depend on the thinnest margins. Stock 12 to 24 cans of whatever tomato format your household actually uses. Diced, crushed, stewed, whatever goes into your regular meals. Buy the store brand while it is still priced normally. Do not assume the Contadina label will look the same next spring. The first two items on this list were about geography. The next one is about something different. What happens when the problem is not a farmer or a trade policy, but the company that puts things in the can itself? Number 5. Canned beans. Most people assume canned beans are invulnerable. They are grown domestically. They are cheap. They have been in the same aisle for decades. Nobody worries about canned beans. And that assumption is exactly why this is the kind of shortage most people do not recognize until they are already standing in the aisle looking at an empty shelf and a temporarily out-of-stock tag. In 2023, Conagra, one of the largest canned food producers in the country, confirmed on an earnings call that its canned bean, chili, pasta, and meat production had been disrupted. Not because beans were hard to grow, not because of a drought or a tariff, because of quality problems with the cans themselves, the seams on the lids. The physical container had an issue, and the entire product line went out of stock while it was resolved. The bean was fine. The can had a problem. The shelf went empty. That is the weak link most shoppers never consider. The can is not just the container. It is part of the production chain. And when the can has an issue sealing quality, manufacturing capacity, the spike in metal costs the food inside does not matter. The items that go first during any kind of bean disruption are the specialty formats: chili beans, seasoned pinto beans, flavored black beans. Those require more complex production setups. The plain variety, plain black beans, plain kidneys, generic pintos, tends to survive longer because it is higher volume and simpler to produce. So the household that only stocks chili-ready beans is the household that loses the format they actually use. The household that has both is just annoyed, not stuck. There is also a real practical difference between canned beans and dry beans. Dry beans are the obvious backup, but they require soaking, long cook times, and more water and fuel. For a household that needs a quick protein on a night when things are complicated, the canned format is not just convenient. It is functionally different. Keep a mix. Plain formats for the long game, flavored or specialty formats for the meals your household actually makes. And pay attention to the bean aisle for substitution tags. That is often the first sign a production run has been cut. But this next one is the item most preparedness shoppers know they should have. What they miss is why the version that actually works is already getting harder to find, and the fresh chicken market tells you exactly why. Number 4. Canned chicken. The premium pouches are still there. The Swanson branded cans are still there. But the store brand chunk chicken, the 12.5-ounce can that makes a quick chicken salad, fills a soup, or stretches a pasta dish, is the one that goes first, and it goes fast when demand moves. Here is what drives that demand spike. When wholesale boneless chicken breast hit nearly $2.77 per pound in mid-2025, roughly double where it had been, people did not stop buying chicken. They adjusted. They looked for alternatives. Shelf-stable canned chicken, which had been quietly sitting in the preparedness corner of the aisle, suddenly became a realistic substitution for households watching fresh meat prices. But canned chicken production was never scaled for that kind of overflow demand. The store brand format has the thinnest margins and the smallest restock priority. When a wave of new buyers shows up at once, that specific format runs out quickly. By early 2026, retail chicken breast was still sitting at $4.17 per pound. And experts at Texas A&M's AgriLife Extension noted that production pressures were not fully resolved, declining fertility rates in broiler flocks, ongoing bird flu risk, and labor challenges all remain as background pressure on the fresh market. That background pressure does not have to spike dramatically to push another wave of buyers toward the canned alternative. There is also something parents with young children understand that pure protein math misses. Canned chicken in a simple format is one of the few shelf-stable animal proteins most kids will actually eat without negotiation. Sardines require taste acceptance. Vienna sausages require a different kind of willingness. Chunk chicken in water can go into pasta, into a simple sandwich, into a soup, and most kids will eat it without realizing anything is different. That flexibility is worth more than the label price. 8 to 12 cans in the most useful format, chunk in water, not broth, gives a household practical protein without depending on the fresh market being reliable. Rotate it through your normal cooking. Do not stock it and forget it. Use it and replace it. The next 3 items are where the list gets more interesting. Number 3 is about a shelf-stable fat source that most families overlook, and the reason to pay attention to the format before you even look at the brand. Number 3. Canned sardines. Here is something that happened over the last few years that nobody in a preparedness aisle would have predicted. Sardines went viral. Tinned fish became a food trend. Social media creators with hundreds of thousands of followers started posting daily sardine boards, smoked mussel plates, and elaborate tinned fish spreads. Videos of tinned fish content gathered tens of millions of views, and the comment sections started filling up with people saying they could not find what was being recommended. The fancy Portuguese tins and the artisan mackerel sold out first, but the affordable store-brand sardine, the $1.49 can in water or tomato sauce that families actually use as a weekly protein, also started thinning from regional shelves. This is the kind of demand spike that is essentially invisible from a store aisle. You see a shelf, you see cans. You do not see that the demand signal accelerated, that production runs were already constrained, and that the wild catch supply for sardines has a biological ceiling that a factory cannot simply expand around. Sardine stocks in some Pacific regions have declined sharply over decades due to overfishing and ocean temperature changes. Some suppliers have posted explicit out-of-stock notices on their websites, citing lower catches and changes in ocean conditions. You cannot solve a fishery issue by running a second production shift. What happens is predictable. The affordable, practical format gets tight. The $10 artisan tin in olive oil stays available because the margin is better and the customer base is smaller. The $1.49 store-brand sardine in tomato sauce, which had a thin margin and a broad customer base, is the one that goes quiet first. The practical move. Stock. Whichever affordable omega-3 fish format is currently available at your store. If sardines are thin, mackerel is nutritionally comparable and currently more available, and mackerel is actually the fastest growing alternative as sardine prices rise. But if you wait until sardines are fashionable everywhere, you may find that mackerel has already followed them up in both price and scarcity. The affordable omega-3 format has become a moving target. Check what is in the section right now. Buy the practical version at the current price. Do not wait for perfect. Number 2 is not a protein. It is not a fat. It is not a flavor base. And that is exactly what makes it the item most preparedness shoppers overlook, because they are thinking about survival math and missing what actually holds a household together when the normal routine is interrupted. Number 2, canned fruit. Imagine a pantry that is genuinely stocked. Beans, chicken, sardines, tomatoes, rice in the back, broth on the side. A family could survive on that for weeks. Now imagine day 3 with a 6-year-old who wants something sweet, something familiar, something that tastes like a normal day and not like an emergency. The pantry has nothing that qualifies. Canned fruit is the category most preparedness-focused shoppers skip because it does not feel essential. It is not a survival staple. It does not have the caloric density of rice or the protein of chicken. So it gets deprioritized. And it is exactly the item that decides whether stored food is livable or just technically sustainable. Now here is what happened to the supply side. Del Monte Foods, the 139-year-old company whose name was on canned peaches, pears, mixed fruit, and more, in nearly every grocery store in the country, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on the 1st of July 2025. The reason was direct. Steel and aluminum tariffs in 2025 spiked the cost of the metal can dramatically. Del Monte's margins on canned fruits and vegetables were already thin. The company was unable to pass the cost increase on to consumers. The math collapsed. A company that had survived 2 world wars, a Great Depression, and every supply shock of the past century could not survive what the price of the can did to its margins in a single year. The bankruptcy plan was confirmed in May 2026. The assets were sold to 3 separate buyers. That means the distribution network for Del Monte's canned fruit brands and the private label production it had been anchoring is now being reassembled by 3 different companies simultaneously. What that looks like on a store shelf in your region over the next year depends on which buyer covers your distribution center, how fast they stabilize operations, and whether the affordable juice pack formats get prioritized in the transition. The premium organic peach in the fancy jar will be fine. The store brand 15-ounce can of peaches in juice, not syrup, is where the gap will show. And there is one more thing about canned fruit in juice that does not get enough credit. It is one of the few shelf-stable items that delivers real vitamin C over a long pantry window. Not a lot. But in a period where fresh produce is inconsistent, that matters quietly. Stock 12 to 18 cans across 2 or 3 varieties in the juice pack format. Peaches, pears, mandarin oranges, mixed fruit, whichever ones your household will actually eat. Buy whatever store brand version is currently reliably stocked. Do not wait to see how the Del Monte label situation resolves. The affordable version is the one worth securing now. And that brings us to number 1. This is the item with a clock. Not a price clock, not a tariff timeline. A literal seasonal clock that most shoppers have never thought about, and once the window closes, there is nothing left until next year. Number 1. Canned pumpkin. One company, one region, one harvest per year. That is the actual supply structure behind canned pumpkin in the United States. Libby's controls approximately 80% of the U.S. canned pumpkin supply. The pumpkins they process grow within roughly a 90-mile radius of Peoria, Illinois. Illinois produces about 90% of U.S. pumpkins in total. When Libby's has a good harvest, stores are well stocked through the fall holiday season. When the harvest is disrupted, excess rain, disease, crop loss, there is no backup region to draw from. There is no warehouse somewhere building inventory between seasons. The crop goes in the ground once. It comes out once. It gets processed and shipped to stores for one buying window per year. In 2015, after a season of record rainfall and crop disease, Libby's explicitly told the public, once they shipped the remainder of the harvest, they would have no Libby's pumpkin to sell until the 2016 crop came in. The yield had been reduced by roughly half. The seasonal stock was managed carefully through the holidays, but once November ended, the shelf was empty until the following fall. That structure has not changed. Pumpkin is still a once-a-year production cycle. The buying window is September through November at most retailers. After the holiday season clears the shelves, that is it. The person who bought 3 extra cans in October is fine through the following summer. The person who planned to grab some on the next shopping trip after Thanksgiving is now on the waiting list until September. Most shoppers have walked past canned pumpkin 100 times and seen it as a holiday baking item. 1 can for pie, maybe 2. That mindset misses what the product actually is. One of the most nutritionally dense, shelf-stable vegetables available, high in beta-carotene, fiber, and vitamin A. It belongs in a working pantry year-round in soups, pasta sauces, oatmeal, baked goods, and quick side dishes, not just in November. The signal to watch is the shelf going thin in early November. Once the holiday displays start looking sparse, the restock is not coming. There is nothing left to restock until next year's harvest is processed. Check online availability in October and you may see low stock flags starting to appear. That is not a glitch. That is the clock running out. Every fall, when the cans first appear on shelves in September, buy 6 to 12. Use them through the year. Replace them the following fall. This is the one item on this list where the timing matters more than the price and more than the brand. Here is the pattern that connects all 7. A pantry can have canned beans, but if the can manufacturer had a disruption, the chili bean format you actually cook with may be the one that went first. It can have tomato sauce, but California planted the fewest processing tomato acres in more than 50 years, and one of the country's oldest canned food brands just went through bankruptcy. It can have coconut milk, but only the expensive brand name version, because the store brand full-fat can was the first casualty when import costs climbed. It can have protein sources, but not the one shelf-stable format a family with children will eat without negotiation. It can have everything on paper and still run out of pumpkin in January because the window closed in November and nobody marked it on the calendar. The shelf looked fine in every case. The category was still present. The practical version, the affordable one, the right size, the familiar label, the one with an annual clock, was the one that quietly disappeared. On your next 3 shopping trips, add 2 items from this list. Not a full pantry run, not a dramatic stock up. Just 2 cans that your household actually uses. in the format that actually fits your cooking. The reason to buy them is already on this list. You just found out what it is. Which of these 7 have you already noticed looking different at your store? A size that changed, a brand that vanished, or a shelf that used to be reliably full? Tell me in the comments. I read every one.